Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I am your host as always, Professor Prime. Let's talk about math and money, all right? Because see, here's the thing, right? Math is everywhere, and you know that I'm a big fan of that if you've been following along. But you know what else is everywhere? At least on this world of ours? Money, right? Money isn't everything, but it's a lot. And the value that we've placed upon it in society is crucial no matter how you feel about it. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about money, and I want to talk about how, math is at its core, and how that while money isn't good, money isn't evil, it can be used for those things, right? And I want to talk about how it functions and flows in general, and how, it's hard to avoid dealing with money in this world, right? And as a result, it's hard to avoid doing math. And I'd argue it's hard to avoid doing the math, but I'd argue that you also just can't get around that, right? But what I do also feel is that understanding that link between math and money is key. You know how many people that I've talked to that will say they don't do math or they don't like math, but they like money and they could do, the math with that. And it's like, that's interesting. And my thing, of course, is they can do the math. They're doing the math. It's just like they need something to speak to them, and because money is so prevalent in this world, and we place so much importance on it, that ends up speaking to a lot of people, and I can't blame them. And before going into things further, I want to just get it out the way and say I think it's fundamentally insane that we don't talk about money more in school, considering how important it is in this age and this time, right? We don't get into that, right? We might like touch on it here and there, but we don't go far enough. And I feel like that's setting students up for failure. And no, I don't care if people disagree with me on that, but I suspect that they won't. But with that in mind, like going into it further, um, with money, we can't really get around the idea of bartering, right? So let's start there and then kind of build up. With bartering, the basic idea is that you're exchanging goods and services, right? You're trading. And when you jump into money, it's a medium to facilitate that trade, right? It's a medium for and of bartering when you think about it. And with that bartering, there are different systems that have been in place over time, and math has been at its core, right? Because it's like you exchange something, it has a certain value to you or a value to the society that you're living in, and you're taking this one thing and you're exchanging it for another, right? And it can get complex and it could stay simple, but no matter what the case is, you're dealing with math. And the whole point of math, right, is to talk about this universe, right? To talk about this world. And we can get inventive with how we use it, but that's the key, right? We get too bogged down in school with, learning it the way it's always been taught. So much so that we miss the point. Like we get kind of close up to it, like right, but then we miss it. Context is key, right? And a lot of people respond to like math and money because it affects our everyday life in a very real, visceral way. And so it's like, again, I think it's insane that we don't teach more on that, right? But going back to what I want to get at, like in terms of expanding, right? So we have this idea of exchanging goods and services and like money being the medium used for that, right? And over time, it's like, hey, it's how you deal with what you're owed versus what you owe in some cases, right? Um, it affects your everyday life, right? We use money to eat, we use money for our entertainment. When we go to work, we're exchanging our time for that money and then that money for other things. And math is involved across the board with all of it, right? Because we're putting in a certain amount of hours each week for a certain amount of pay per week, which leads to, per year down the line if you're salaried. And not only is there money in, that just getting a job, There's money, and sorry, I meant to say there's not only money in like having that job, but like getting it, right? And one of the things that they don't talk about in school is that, you know, you have to have money to kind of make money in that sense. Where you've heard that before, but it's also kind of true. Like even when just dealing with a job, right? Because you need to have money to buy your clothes, right? You have to have money to either buy gas and have a car, or you need money to use public transportation, whatever the case may be. You have to consider distance, you have to consider time, and there's a lot of like math and all of that across the board. And then once we do get that job, there's math after the fact too, because we're not just doing a job and making the money and that's it, right? We're getting taxes taken out. We have rent, we have food, loans potentially. We have a lot of other things, right? And what's crazy to me is that we don't teach that in school, right? Like, I guess you figure, oh, it's just a given, but it's like, but do you teach students how to budget? It's like, yes, you should be teaching them algebra. It's a really good tool, but teach them why that they're using that, and also don't just teach them that. Teach them algebra, sure, but teach them how to do their taxes. Teach them how to, manage a budget. Teach them that it's gonna take money to go to college, right? And it's gonna take money to like just get a job and keep the job too when you think about it. And it's gonna take like math to do all of that, and we should be teaching that sort of thing more. And so yeah, it's kind of crazy, but going even further into it, right? We got the idea like, okay, yes, money is the medium for bartering. We're saying that like, hey, money is worth this or money is worth that, and we all kind of collectively agree upon it. And by that I mean, a lot of us kind of have to agree with it to an extent, or at least that's how it feels right now, right? And then on top of that, you have the idea of currency, different exchange rates, right? Different countries have a different worth for this amount of money or that amount of money, and what we're using for the money, right? Because if we're dealing with physical money, there's different ways to deal with that too, right? You could deal with paper, you can deal with coins, you can deal with a lot of different things. You could also deal with things on the virtual level, right? And you can deal with like money in a traditional sense of like whether you're dealing with physical or virtual, you could deal with that like, hey, in that traditional sense, where it's like, well, maybe I was working this job and I have this amount of money, but you could also do that in more like abstract abstract terms. I was combining abstract and concrete, but I don't know why. But you could deal with stocks, and you could deal with things along those lines. And the thing with money, you don't have to be an expert on it, but I do find it fascinating that when you do go into it a little bit more, whether you're dealing with finance, economics, accounting, whatever the case may be, and these all have overlaps. You're dealing with a lot of math, right? You're dealing with algebra, you're dealing with calculus, you're dealing with stats, you're dealing with things across the board. And these are the systems that are at play on a larger scale that we don't really teach about, right? Because I'm all for learning the basics, but my thing is like, and this is my personal thing. I really don't think we need as much time devoted to some of the basics as we do, or at the very least, I feel like we're not making effective use of our time when we're teaching math. It is a dumpster fire, in my opinion, like how we're handling things. We're just throwing things at students, hoping that it sticks, and we're not teaching them that, hey, this world, money is very prevalent in this world, it's very important in this world. And we don't teach them the math behind that, right? We don't teach them how they're using math in their everyday life, and that's all deeply frustrating. And I've gone into that in different videos, so I don't want to digress too much. But my whole thing is that money, while not good or evil, can be used to liberate or subjugate, and that's powerful. And again, math is at the core of that. And to this day, I've taught like a lot of classes, a lot of students, like well into the thousands at this point. And the unit on taxes was the one that people got most excited about because that impacted them. They could relate to that. And I say this as someone who likes teaching and likes teaching math there is so much that we are just wasting their time with, right? Because here's the thing, right? Math doesn't have to be this deeply complex thing. It absolutely can be, but it doesn't have to be, right? And so when we're teaching these things in class, it's like, oh, well, yeah, you have to like years of math and this and that to understand this concept. It's like not really. There are basic things we deal with every day in life pertaining to money, pertaining to economics, and just our whole financial system. Um, and there's a lot that people can understand and kind of have to at some point or another. And so I really do think it'd be great if we taught that more. Um, that's not to say financial literacy courses don't exist or things like that. It's just like it's exceedingly rare, and that's insane to me. It's dangerously insane, in fact. And I can't help but think that that's not an accident, and you can make of that what you will. But my whole thing, because I don't want to ramble like too much, but my whole thing is like, right, at the end of the day, money is inherently mathematical. When you're dealing with value and assigning that value and having systems at play that deal with that value. And just to navigate things, you need math, and you're using math whether you realize it or not. So, with that in mind, I think you should be intentional. I think you should not only have a good number sense, but a good money sense. And some of you all are lucky enough to already have that. Some of you, you'll get there, but it's needed either way. And I feel like this probably won't be the last time I'll be talking about math and money. In fact, I know it won't. I have some ideas already, and I might do them like shortly after this, but or I might do like deeper dives into some of this stuff. But it's interesting. You can't get around money in this world, and you can't get around math either. And you notably can't get around with money and not deal with math, because you literally don't have money without that math. And that's worth thinking about. Professor Prime out.